Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 5th of July of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, and first we will start with the city of Kostiantynivka, where the real drama is taking place. I would like to remind you that several days ago the Russians proposed, first of all, the Russians several days ago announced that the city of Kostiantynivka was completely captured by Russians, and the Russians published a video with probably hundreds of flags through the city, and this is the last video about flags on the territory of the city of Kostiantynivka that was published yesterday. But several hours later, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the commander and the general staff of Ukraine rejected this information. The Ukrainians stated that the Ukrainians still control the city of Kostiantynivka. They denied Putin's claims that Kostiantynivka had been captured, and Zelensky added that if Kostiantynivka is now under Russian control, then Putin probably won't have a problem meeting me there and ending the war. So those were the statements of Ukrainian side, and the Russians of course wanted to develop the situation further, and the Russians yesterday in the evening proposed the Kostiantynivka ceasefire. In connection with the capturing of the city of Kostiantynivka by Russian troops and the establishment of Russian full control over it, the Russian side is ready to conduct a humanitarian operation to transfer the bodies of fallen Ukrainian servicemen in this town. For these purposes, the Russian side proposes to cease shelling the city of Kostiantynivka from 12 p.m. Moscow time to 6 p.m. Moscow time on July 6, 2026. The Ukrainian side is to inform the Russian command of its decision through existing intelligence channels by 12 p.m. So the Ukrainians had to inform the Russians by 12 p.m. of the 5th of July of 2026, but it seems that according to information we have, the Ukrainians rejected this idea. And we understand why, because the NATO summit is going to take place between the 7th and 8th of July of 2026, and of course the Ukrainians want to save the city of Kostiantynivka under their control, at least virtually. So they will deny the Russian control over the city probably until the end of the NATO summit, and probably after the end of the NATO summit the Ukrainians will start changing the map through the city of Kostiantynivka slowly but step by step, and we will see the same picture as we used to see through the city of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. But another important thing, that when talking about the Russian control over the city of Kostiantynivka, we need to understand that there are still soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the city. We're not talking about Ukraine control like this, like Ukraine's control, let's say 30 or 50% of the city. This is not the situation. When talking about ratio, we can say that the ratio is 1 to 5, probably something like this. The Russians have, let's say, 5,000 soldiers on the territory of the city of Kostiantynivka, and the Ukrainians have just 1,000. But another important thing, that when talking about the Ukrainian presence on the territory of Kostiantynivka, first of all, we are talking about dozens of pockets of resistance through the city of Kostiantynivka, where the Ukrainians have from, let's say, several dozens of soldiers till several hundreds of soldiers. So we're talking just a small pockets of resistance that currently have no chances to escape the city and have no chances to establish connections with the mainland. So this is the main problem both for Russians and for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians use these pockets of resistance and these thousands of soldiers as the reason why they can say that the city is still under the Ukraine control, but the problem is that the Russians have isolated the city of Kostiantynivka from the north, and currently these thousands of soldiers have no chances to cross these lines, so to establish connections with the city of Alexeyevo-Drushkovka, which means this is the reason why the Russians stated that the city is under complete Russian control, but more precisely it's better to call the situation as the city of Kostiantynivka is completely isolated from the city of Alexeyevo-Drushkovka. The Russians obviously need weeks or even months to finish the clearing operation of the city of Kostiantynivka, because 1,000 of Ukrainians is a very big number, and they can hold their positions for weeks probably through basements and different constructions. And the Russians don't have time for this. The Russians need to move further in the northern direction with the purpose to begin the battle for the settlement of Alexeyevo-Drushkovka. So that is why it is much more better for Russians to finish the battle for the city of Kostiantynivka and to allow these Ukrainians, these soldiers, these thousands of Ukrainian soldiers to leave the city even without battle, even without being hit or attacked from the Russian side. So that is why the Russians even created this theory and this idea of the Kostiantynivka ceasefire. The Russians understand that for them it's better for these thousands of troops of the armed forces of Ukraine to leave the city of Kostiantynivka without being hit from the Russian side. For them it's even better than to stuck in the city of Kostiantynivka for 2-3 months by moving from one basement to another, by clearing one building after another. The Russians don't want this. The Russians want to continue the battle for the city of Alexeyevo-Drushkovka and to answer the city of Drushkovka. So that is why the Russians created this ceasefire. And the main idea of this ceasefire is to evacuate the bodies of fallen soldiers. And it's impossible to evacuate bodies of fallen soldiers. There are lots of fallen soldiers, bodies of fallen soldiers. So that is why the idea is very simple. The Ukrainians from the city will have the possibilities to take the bodies of fallen soldiers and to leave the city itself. And the Russians are allowed to represent the situation as evacuation of fallen bodies. So this is the most important thing. But as we can see, as a result of the negotiation process, as a result of the first round of the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, the Ukrainians rejected this idea because Ukrainians demanded for guarantees. Who knows what the Russians would do according to pro-Ukraine understanding of the situation if the soldiers decide to leave the city of Kostiantynivka with the fallen bodies of troops of the armed forces of Ukraine. So that is why the Russians decided to use media for these purposes as security guarantees. After the Russian military department announced its readiness to hand over the bodies of fallen Ukrainian servicemen on the condition of a ceasefire by the Ukrainian armed forces in the city of Kostiantynivka, more than 20 editions of the media from different countries and continents expressed a desire to travel to the city to be present at the handover of the bodies. So, which means that the Russians said the Ukrainians, if you want guarantees that nobody is going to attack the servicemen, the troops of the armed forces in the city of Kostiantynivka, we can use media. And if you attack, you will be able to show this picture all over the world, and you can show these pictures even on the NATO summit. And this is the final Russian proposal. And today we received the report that the Ukrainians this evening on the 5th of July of 2026 rejected even this idea. The Ukrainians rejected this idea, and the Russians later emphasized that Ukrainians not just rejected the idea of handing over of the fallen bodies of the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians reported that there are 13.5 thousand soldiers on the territory of the city of Kostiantynivka, not soldiers but bodies of fallen soldiers. So 13.5 thousand soldiers, fallen bodies of the armed forces of Ukraine are on the territory of the city of Kostiantynivka, and we're not talking about soldiers who are still there and who most likely will not be able to leave the city. So this is the situation. The Russians most likely will not be able to finish the battle and to secure the city as fast as they wanted. They will be forced to waste weeks before they finish clearing every single basement, and only then the Russians will be able to continue further. Maybe the Russians will start even moving further, but all these movements would be under very high risk from any attack from the Ukrainian side, from the city itself, from these pockets of resistance. And of course, while the pockets of resistance are on the territory of the city of Kostiantynivka, this will allow the Ukrainians to use these soldiers and maybe even videos with flags to confirm that the city is still under complete Ukrainian control. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to happen next. And meanwhile, the Russians finished the preparation before the next mega strike. Most likely, the next mega strike is going to take place between the 5th and 6th of July of 2026, a day before the beginning of the NATO summit. Pro-Russian sources and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians have already finished the redeployment of aviation as close as possible to the territory of Ukraine. The Russians most likely will use strategic aviation. The Russians most likely will use Iskander missiles and hundreds of drones. This attack most likely will take place tonight. So this is the reason why we haven't received almost anything during the previous 12 hours. The Russians and the Ukrainians were preparing before this massive attack. Most likely the Ukrainians also started preparations to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, also before the beginning of the NATO summit. But the main problem for the Ukrainian side is that the Russians during the previous 24 hours were hunting and attacking everything that the Ukrainians could use for attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. The Russians attacked lots of gas stations, lots of parking sites, and lots of fuel facilities, trying to not allow the Ukrainians to use the period before the beginning of the NATO summit as the period to achieve immediate victory. Now let's discuss everything in details. It seems that the Ukrainians were planning to use the northern parts of Ukraine, Chernihiv and Sumy region with the purpose to attack the city of Moscow right before the beginning of the NATO summit, or probably during the NATO summit. So that is why the Russians were attacking this territory using hundreds of drones. And in this video we can see how the Russians were searching and attacking facilities, warehouses, barracks, different objects of energy infrastructure, just with one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to accumulate drones with the purpose to attack the territory of Russia later. In this video we can see another object of energy infrastructure that well protected, as you can see, that was attacked by Russians. And in this video we can see a report that the Russians attacked a railway station in the most northern parts of the Chernihiv region. Maybe the Ukrainians were planning to bring additional drones using railway service, but the Russians attacked the train that entered the northern parts of this area. Furthermore, the Russians attacked a warehouse on the territory of the city of Chernihiv itself. So the Russians, as you can see, were attacking this territory significantly, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to launch another mid-range or long-range strike. Another important territory, Diakovka, the Russians attacked an object of energy infrastructure, trying to destroy a substation. So furthermore, the Russians destroyed few more gas stations through the city of Sumy. Another one gas station was destroyed in the most northwestern parts of the settlement. We're talking about this gas station. As you can see, there is a very big parking site behind this gas station. So the Russians were trying to achieve two goals with this attack. The Russians attacked another object of energy infrastructure through the city of Sumy itself. Here we have a substation that was damaged or maybe even destroyed by Russians. And the Russians destroyed a gas station, or at least two gas stations, through the southern parts of the city of Sumy. And we have lots of pictures in this matter how fire crews were trying to extinguish the fire in this area. So summarizing everything, we can say that due to significant activity of Russians through the northern and eastern parts of Ukraine, we can make a conclusion that the Ukrainians during the before or during the NATO summit were planning to attack in the direction of the cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg with the purpose to achieve immediate victory. Another important thing is the city of Kharkiv. Also, lots of facilities were destroyed by Russians. The southern parts of the city of Kharkiv, as a result of attack, this parking site was destroyed. We have video of this. So we have these pictures. We can see fire crews that were trying to extinguish the fire when the Russians attacked this territory. And we have several tracks that were destroyed, as you can see, according to this picture. Another important thing, the Russians attacked parking sites and a gas station through the eastern parts of the city of Kharkiv. Here we have a gas station that was destroyed, and as you can see, the Russians were attacking the territory in the area of this parking site that Ukrainians also could use for drone carrier purposes. So the Russians, as you can see, are trying to do everything they can with the purpose not to allow this long-range pre-NATO summit strike to happen. Furthermore, the Russians were attacking logistics between the western and the eastern parts of Ukraine that go through the cities of Zaporozhye and Dnipro. In this video, we can see the Russian attacking the area of the settlement by the name of Lymanovka. The Russians attacked this fuel facility in the area of the settlement of Berestin. The Russians attacked a railway station, railway service, the substation that the Ukrainians use for the railway service. The Russians attacked the city of Pavlohrad, and as for the city of Pavlohrad, this parking site with trucks was destroyed. We have a video published by pro-Russian sources. In this video, we can see the consequences of attack. A black smoke over this territory right after the Russians attacked the territory of this parking site or this service center. We have these pictures where we can see dozens of trucks that were destroyed by Russians. So the Russians are trying to make everything possible with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia before the NATO summit. This is right now the most important goal for Russians, and they're doing everything they can with the purpose not to allow Zelensky to get at least small cards, strong cards during this meeting. And this is a very important situation, and of course the Russians will try to carry out a strike from their side to improve their cards even more, and then we'll see what kind of decisions the European countries are going to make after the end of this summit. But so we have already received reports that the Ukrainians most likely will receive additional fundings, and we are talking about a lot of money. And the Russians attacked the city of Mykolaiv. A warehouse was attacked and destroyed, as you can see, through the southern parts of the settlement. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Kharkiv direction, where another breakthrough is brewing. The Russians during the previous days improved their position significantly. This is the end of the 3rd of July, this is the end of the 4th of July, and this is the end of the 5th of July. The Russians, according to the group of forces north, entered the villages of Yurchenkova and Belyi Kolodiaz. Currently there are very heavy clashes in this area. The Ukrainians are forced to retreat from these territories, and the most important thing, if the Russians, as a result of this offensive operation, are able to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Belyi Kolodiaz, this is going to be something like a breakthrough and complete collapse of the northeastern defense of the Kharkiv region, and this will lead to automatic collapse of everything to the top of this red line. So the entire northeastern parts of Kharkiv region will fall in Russia's hands if Ukrainians lose control over the city of Belyi Kolodiaz. And then the next target for Russians would be the city of Veliki Burluk. This is the next big city in this area, but it will be much more easier for Russians to continue advancing along the river of Seversky Donets in the southern direction with the purpose to cut logistics. So the Russians will be able to continue offensive operation in the direction of the village of Veliki Burluk without even fighting for this. And if Russians are able to advance along the river of Seversky Donets, this will force the Ukrainians to fall back from the settlement of Veliki Burluk in the direction of the city of Shevchenkova. So, which means that the city of Belyi Kolodiaz is the key city to the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region. Moving further, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians also, not 12, but 72 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly through the Barove pocket. We have already discussed the situation during the previous video. As of the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special or additional. Probably the most important updates are coming from the area of the cities of Izum and Oskol. The Ukrainians are trying to bring additional reinforcements in the direction of the Barove pocket, but Russians destroy everything that moves in this direction. So which means that the Russians have already established complete FPV drone control over the territory, which means that the logistics of the Barove pocket of the armed forces of Ukraine continues deteriorating. As for the city of Lyman, we expect that during the NATO summit, so before the NATO summit or right after the end of the NATO summit, the Russians will announce complete control over the city of Lyman as well. The Ukrainians from their side will also try to do everything they can with the purpose not so to allow the Russians to create or to repeat the Kostiantynivka situation. So that is why we expect that during the next 24-48 hours, the Ukrainians will introduce fresh forces on the Russian side of the river of Seversky Luhansk and Donetsk with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to allow the Russians to take the city under complete control before NATO summit ends. As for the Slavyansk-Konstantinovka direction, we have already discussed the situation in Kostiantynivka, but we have a lot of interesting updates from the city of Kramatorsk itself. The Russians intensified the bombardment of the city. During the previous 24 hours, lots of destructions were recorded through the city. The Russians right now try to destroy warehouses, ammo depots, big buildings, big constructions that the Ukrainians can use for logistic purposes. And it seems that the Russians came to the conclusion that the Ukrainians will not withdraw troops from the Donbas region, so that is why the Russians will be forced to finish the goal of the Donbas Arc operation using military means. As for the territory between the cities of Dobropolye and Orechov, during the previous 12 hours nothing special was recorded. Lots of strikes, lots of attacks from the Russian side, but as you can see, without significant changes on the ground. But once again, we expect that before the beginning of the NATO summit, Russians will announce several more towns and cities and villages captured by the armed force of the Russian Federation. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.